It is Monday, February 3rd, 2025. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast over here at Slate. Back with you again, I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer for Slate, and I also co-host the college football podcast Split Zone Duo. It's that funny week on the American sports calendar, that bye week for the NFL right before the Super Bowl. We will have some heavier topics on the show this week, some lighter topics on the show this week. We will start with an enormous, earth-shattering trade in the NBA that we are all, I think, still trying to wrap our head around. A long list of allegations of sexual misconduct against a popular NFL kicker, 9 of them as we record, and then the expansion of a story about gambling in the NBA, which we all learned about last year, but thought might have died out. It turns out that it hasn't quite. As usual, joining me this week is Lindsay Gibbs, the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter that covers the biggest stories of the moment in women's sports. Lindsay, how are you?
Well, I'm doing better than Drake after the Grammys last night, but I also have some exciting new discoveries about our jinxing potential, which of course we discussed last week while we were talking about what a terrible season that the 76ers were having. And we said, well, last time we talked about the Cavs and what a great season they were having. They turned into a 500 team for a couple of weeks. But interesting thing, once we mentioned the jinx on our Monday episode during the Philly segment, the Cavs went back to being world beaters. Similarly, Philly had a phenomenal week of basketball after we had our segment about how bad they were. However, when they were up by 26 points over the Boston Celtics, and I skeet about our jinxing power on Blue Sky, they immediately collapsed and the Celtics produced a historic comeback. So we are so powerful and it's pretty cool.
Wow. Jinxes within jinxes.
Yeah.
We could sell this service to sports teams at all levels.
Let's not use it responsibly at all.
Regression is real, folks.
Also with us, of course, is Ben Lindbergh. Ben is a senior editor for The Ringer. He co-hosts the Effectively Wild baseball podcast. Ben, I take it you also hopefully had a better Sunday than Drake?
I did, yes. And to quote Shams Charania, yes, this is real, which is something that needs to be said about a lot of news these days, but also about this podcast. We're all here. It's accurate.
Before we get into our business, and we've got lots of it this week, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. The Hang Up and Listen way of saying thanks is via a bonus episode, and we've got a good one for you this week on yet more efforts to shorten games across sports. Yes, more of them. We are in the golden days of execs proposing ideas to shorten athletic competitions. I think there's never been more of it happening at this high a level, certainly, than there is the last few years and even the last few weeks. You can hear that episode right now as long as you are a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. Ben, Lindsay, a story. I was sitting around late Saturday night on the West Coast, looking at my phone before bed, as I do, not expecting much to come of it, given the late hour, even on this coast. And then I saw a quote-unquote report from ESPN's Shams Charania, mentioned there by Ben, that I genuinely thought might be the result of a social media account hacking. We now know that it was not. This was a 3-team trade involving the Los Angeles Lakers, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Utah Jazz. But I'm going to simplify it for the purposes of this podcast and say that the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic, Luka holy goddamn Doncic, one of the most gifted scorers in basketball history, a consensus top 3 player in the prime of his career, fresh off leading an otherwise mediocre team to the NBA Finals roughly 8 months ago, to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis and a first-round pick in 2029. There were other peripheral pieces in this deal, but that's how we're going to describe it. You can look up the rest if you want to go through the entire long list of assets. The Mavericks let it leak to some reporters that they had questions about Doncic's conditioning, which is a weird thing to do when you're trading for the famously often injured Anthony Davis. Lindsay, are you buying that explanation or anything about Dallas's approach to this trade?
Fat phobia strikes again, and I think this is one of its worst cases. I mean, this is just ridiculous. ridiculous. I cannot believe any of this is real. I take very detailed notes usually, preparing for our segments. My notes for this segment, which I did accidentally copy and paste into the master doc, I'm sorry if anyone saw those, they're incomprehensible because that's just where my brain is. So I just think it is wild to, hot take, trade a 25-year-old superstar who has been on the first team, All-NBA first team 5 times, something even Steph Curry has not done. Steph Curry has not made 5 NBA first teams. Luka Doncic already has at age 25. This guy is the face of the franchise, and that is not do enough to describe it. Somebody was saying it's going to cost millions of dollars to redo all the Luka murals around Dallas that exist and all the branding that is associated with Luka. He has been the Mavericks, and to trade him because of conditioning concerns and to immediately leak that he was too fat, when this guy has just poured out his heart and soul for you on the court. And hello, they made the finals last year. He actually dragged the team while he was injured. He played through injury. And look, I get it. His conditioning could be better. He needs to take better care of his body. Pretty much describes most 25-year-olds, even those in the NBA. Most of these, legendary psychopaths about the care of their body don't get that way until they're getting close to 30. Even like Tom Brady, you didn't see going all out. And, this narrative has followed Luka throughout his career. I remember when before the draft, there was talk about teams weren't going to draft him because he had a diet of Doritos and soda. That isn't what 90% of NBA players and 18-year-olds around the world eat. So look, I just think that I'm heartbroken for Dallas fans. I'm infuriated that they then put out Luka Doncic's weight, the fat shotting they leaked, he is above 260 pounds, they said the number, which you just never do in a breakup. Hello. And then but I have to say, like I said, heartbroken for Mavericks fans who were all just, it seems, holding funerals and wanting to leave the organization in exodus. But also, I am the embodiment of the Marie Kondo meme, I love mess right now. I have consumed every emergency NBA podcast over the past 24 hours, which there have been a lot.
Thank you to the first responders.
Yeah, really. I mean, gosh, it's just so nice that we have people who will pull the long hours. One of my favorite moments has been the Devin Booker meme. Did you guys see Devin Booker's tweet? Where it was the Mavericks there was a meme going around social media about you can't post one photo and assume everyone will know what you're talking about. And the Mavericks Twitter account posted the photo of Luka grinning up at Devin Booker and said, okay, last one. They've been doing a slew of those memes. And so they posted that picture and Devin Booker quote tweeted it and said, well, they kept their word. And that was real. I thought that was fake, but that legitimately came from Devin Booker's Twitter account. And he never tweets. So that was great. And best of all, we got Zach Lowe back. Zach Lowe had to record an emergency 18-minute thing. I'm sure he's barred from making money off anything, but he just put it up on X. And I was so happy to have Zach Lowe back. So I'm really happy right now, even though this is terrible. This is a terrible idea.
Yeah, I think we all had an experience similar to yours, Alex, wherever we were doom scrolling. I enjoyed Dirk Nowitzki's just a single emoji face response, and that sort of said it all. But I thought the 25% tariffs would be the wildest news about trade on Saturday. And then with one Shams bomb, that changed. Not that the tariffs...
But
thank you. Not that the tariffs make any more sense than the Mavs move here, and the real world implications are way worse, but at least we had some inkling that Trump was considering an incomprehensible self-destructive decision. The Mavs took us by surprise, and not just us, but also NBA media members, front office folks, opposing including players. Even the players involved in the deal were in the dark until this Shams bomb was dropped. I wonder what Woj was feeling in that moment. Was there some part of him that was just itching to be back in the game? Or was he thinking, you know what, I'm glad.
You have to think.
Yeah, just that instinct.
Yeah.
It's got to be pretty deeply ingrained, but I hope he's happy and doing well. But this is one of those trades that just makes waves across the culture. Even people who couldn't care less about the sport in question are saying, wait, what happened? Please put this in terms I understand. Even in my world of baseball, everyone was saying, what's the baseball equivalent to this trade? And of course, there isn't really one because these are different sports structurally, but it is kind of akin to the Mookie Betts trade, not in terms of the specific parameters. Alex Verdugo is no Anthony Davis, but in the sense that players that young and that good, as a rule, don't get traded. So when these guys did, it's mind-blowing, and it's the kind of move that can make fans turn on a team, and justifiably so. The Mavs have had a rough month. Luka's played 22 games this season. I get it, but those things are connected. First of all, the team was 19-10 as of Christmas morning. It's 7-14 since Luka strained his calf that day. And sure, you could say maybe you're worried that that won't be the last calf strain or strain of something in his future, but you're acquiring AD, who is not only several years older, but also has his own history of injuries and lack of durability. So it's hard to make the case that this is an upgrade in that sense. And of course, Mavs GM Nico Harrison, Lindsay, you're alluding to all the stuff that was leaked that kind of came out behind the scenes. Harrison said publicly, I believe that defense wins championships. I believe that getting an all-defensive center and an all-NBA player with a defensive mindset gives us a better chance. We're built to win now and in the future. Now, the in the future part is hard to parse given the ages of the centerpieces of this trade. But
Davis is about to be 32.
Yes.
7 years or so older than Luka.
And not a young 32.
No. He's still a great player, but there's a lot of mileage on that body. And yeah, he can opt out in 2027 is it? But really, it's hard to say that this is a future-oriented move. And as for the defense wins championships, I'm always skeptical when someone says that, or when someone says any one factor wins championships. It's just too reductive. Sure, great defense can win championships, but so can being one of the best offensive players that the league has ever seen. That came close to winning them a championship last year. And by the way, their defense hasn't even been that bad with Luka. They're not an elite defensive team, and sure, AD's a better defender, but given everything that Luka does, I mean, you have to weigh the holistic, and that is not a pun when it comes to weigh, but you have to consider all the factors and look at the overall value. And clearly, Luka was offering an enormous amount, and they constructed their entire roster around him, really, for the better part of the last decade. It's how would this player work with Luka? And now suddenly they've decided to blow that up for reasons that just seem inscrutable.
I think it's heartening that everyone from the most casual of NBA casuals to the tried and true NBA lifers and the most plugged in beat reporters in the sport seem to have more or less the same reaction to this. It's a bummer because Anthony Davis is so good that to talk about him as a terrible consolation prize feels like a disservice to him. But I think everyone understands, even if you're not an NBA savant in terms of your knowledge of the sport, that they just don't make guys like Luka Doncic. Like, they occasionally make guys kind of like Anthony Davis, not many, but like, there have been other 7-foot, really dominant defensive centers who can score quite a bit in the NBA. Like, there's at least one better right now in the NBA. Is there a better wing scorer who is likely to come into the NBA in the next, 5, even 10 years who can do the things that Luka can do? Hard to see it, right? Like, hard to see it. Mm-hmm. And I think that to dress it up in conditioning issues, whether that's the truth or just they were tired of him and or have a dogged commitment to defense, is just skeptical. Like, Lindsay, if this guy only eats bacon and that's what he needs to score the way that he scores, like, you get him a pig farm. You do what works, in my opinion. And I think that to come down on him because you have a particular idea of what a great athlete has to look like is just another perplexing dimension of this to me. It's 2025.
I have been a fat person my whole life, and I have never been able to play a complete I would never be able to even keep up with a complete basketball game. This guy is athletic. It is crazy to think of how strong he must be, and it's just so icky. Weight is a really personal thing, and I'm not saying that Luka Doncic couldn't benefit from getting in better conditioning, and I'm sure the Mavs believe that his calf wouldn't be injured and he wouldn't be putting as much strain on his body if he dropped a little weight. But again, they have to really believe that this is something he will never, ever, ever change. And I guess that he's going the way of a Joel Embiid, whose body just kind of gives out under the weight of him. But it's staggering. First of all, the fact that the return, like I said, Anthony Davis, great, but the Lakers got to hold on to a first-round pick from 2031. They didn't even have to completely empty out the basket. They keep Austin Reeves. They keep all these good pieces. And then you have the fact that this has been going on behind the scenes for a month. They didn't shop him around. When you have the reason that things like this don't come out of nowhere is because when you have an asset as valuable as a Luka Doncic, and for whatever reason, you want to part ways, which the only reason is if that star is demanding a trade, right? Because it's really incomprehensible that you would just be like, nah, no thanks. You know what? We'd like you to be coming in a little bit earlier for practice and, get a little bit more lean muscle. So, the 5 All-NBAs and dragging us to the finals, that's meaningless because, you're not following this strict routine or whatever. But the reason we don't have moments like this is because it's the stupidest way to do business. If you have an asset that valuable, you shop it around. You let it be known. You get the best offers from everyone, and then you see what you can have. You really maximize it. And it seems like there's rumors that maybe one other team other than the Lakers was approached, but the GM, Nico, has said that he only approached the Lakers. He and Rob Pelinka have a relationship built through Kobe Bryant that goes back decades. And apparently they started talking a month ago and started talking specifically about Luka 3 weeks ago. And one of the quotes, I think this is I saw this in a Yahoo article, was that the Mavericks GM confirmed that he broached the possibility of trading Doncic first, which the Lakers quickly responded to. Yeah, I bet they did. How quickly do you have to respond?
Ben, I'm curious, what is even the rush here? You might want Anthony Davis for the stretch run, but the Mavericks are about 500. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not a title contending team. Even if you're really sick of Luka, I mean, can't you do it over the off season when you've got time to create more of a feeding frenzy instead of an artificially imposed deadline for the trade deadline, just a couple days out from this move being made? It just seems like really weird process.
Yeah.
Even if you're right and everyone else is wrong.
Yeah. If you're going to have a move where you hear from front offices afterward, we didn't even know he was on the market, which is always disconcerting, then you better have just gotten an absolute windfall for the guy, such that it's hard to even imagine that you could have done better with any other potential trade partner. And that's the furthest thing from the case here. So absolutely, the concept itself of trading him seems deeply flawed, but the timing itself and the way they went about it, just as much so. Even if you say that maybe things will get worse with age, it's funny, we were actually considering a topic about body image and athleticism and perceptions of fitness when it comes to athletes, because this was a conversation started by a photo of Patrick Mahomes that was taken where people were kind of dumping on him and his alleged dad bod. And then Patrick Mahomes tweeted himself at #dadbod season. And it started this larger conversation about, have we been going about this all wrong? Are we just looking at athletes and evaluating them based on aesthetics and not taking into account the way they move? Rustin Dodd wrote about this for The Athletic, this concept of a kinematic mover, which sounds sort of redundant. Isn't all movement kinematic? But it's functional strength and speed and agility, not always accompanied by the conventional standard of an Adonis-like physique. And, we're all familiar with the people who don't kind of have the prototypical athletic physique. This is what peak performance looks like, that meme. And yet they are extremely athletic and durable, and they can get it done. And this is one example of that. And Luka was mentioned in that article along with Jokic and other players. And so it's funny, the timing where we were like, have we all become enlightened when it comes to body types and makeup? And clearly not, if this was a major factor here. Now, of course, it's possible that any conditioning issues that Luka has at 25 could be worse at 30 and beyond. It's also possible, as Lindsay said, that maybe when he really has to start taking more care of himself because you do get older and the metabolism slows down, that he will. And hey, maybe being teammates with LeBron James will help with that. Who knows? But again, AD is currently injured. He has an abdominal strain. It's not serious, but that's just emblematic of his whole career too. We should mention also the financial implications here, because that seems like it must be a factor. Dallas just ducked under the tax threshold with this move. And so raise the banner, I guess, if you're a Mavs fan. That's something to be thrilled about. And of course, Luka was going to be in line for a Supermax extension, which he no longer is because of this trade. And then there was also the possibility that he would be able to opt out instead of accepting the Supermax, and that the highest bidder could swoop in and take him. So there are financial implications to this, but this is the kind of guy that you spend whatever it takes to keep. So that might be sort of an explanation, but it's not really an excuse. And I think it's telling that no one has really had a good defense. So speaking of good defense, no one has really had one for this move. There's really no defender. Even if you want to play devil's advocate, you could say, okay, many times when you trade a superstar, the problem is you're just not going to get a superstar back. You're getting a bunch of draft picks or prospects, and they probably won't turn into anyone as good as the guy you have. Well, in this case, you're getting a superstar and you're getting a Hall of Famer in AD. And also, I suppose it's theoretically possible that this team could still make the playoffs and make a run with Davis. And Harrison said that, when we win, I believe the frustration will go away. So yeah, somehow if the Mavs won a title, if flags fly forever, I guess that would ease the sting. But that seems less likely today than it was a couple days ago.
Yeah, just to hit a few more points. First of all, the Mavs do have these new owners. There's a conspiracy going out there, like maybe they want to alienate their whole fan base so they can easily move to Vegas because their gambling is where they made their money. And it doesn't look like gambling is going to be legal in Texas anytime soon. I do love conspiracies around billionaires. And listen, nothing is too outlandish to think of billionaires these days. So if you're on the billionaire conspiracy train, stay on the billionaire conspiracy train. But then there's, also the fact that was this as secret and as closed off as everyone thought? AD waived his trade kicker really quickly, which was money he was due if he was ever to be traded. And it seems like he immediately waived that, which is a little suspicious because why would he do that? But most of all, I am excited for Barry's Boot Camp, Erewhon Smoothie, Luka to emerge. LA changes people. And the sunshine, the fresh air, the kale, it's going to be good.
Mm-hmm. Fortunately, LA is not known for a fixation on superficial appearance, so shouldn't be a problem. But if you're talking about conspiracy theories, I guess one I've also seen floated is, they had to agree to trade Luka to the Lakers in order to get this ownership stake. So you could go down the rabbit hole if you wanted to, but it really is sort of they can't keep getting away with this situation with the Lakers, because we talked 2 weeks ago about the Dodgers vacuuming up superstars. They're not even the number one team in LA when it comes to collecting elite talent, considering the Lakers' history of trading for stars they didn't draft, guys who are good enough to be known by only one name: Wilt, Kareem, Shaq, LeBron, Luka, so many more, including AD for that matter. I do wonder, I'll share one more Harrison quote because, of course, he was careful not to fat shame publicly. But
you only do that through leaks.
Yes.
It's not classy to do it into a microphone.
One thing about me, I'm not going to talk bad about any players. I'd just say there's levels to it, and there's people that fit the culture, and there's people that come in and add to the culture. Those are distinct things. I believe the people that are coming in are adding to the culture. And so he was asked, well, does that mean that Luka was detracting from the culture? He kind of no commented that, but the implication is pretty clear. Look, I believe that culture is a real thing, and certainly in basketball, chemistry matters, but Luka is so good and was carrying that team to success. So really, how bad could the cultural contributions have been? We're not talking about Jimmy Butler. The last thing, I wonder whether this marks maybe some sort of bellwether, some paradigm shift when it comes to the player empowerment era that we have been talking about for years now. People immediately started speculating about, will there be another domino to fall? Will there be a LeBron trade? Will LeBron go to Golden State and team up with Curry, which as we speak seems unlikely. Then again, nothing seems as unlikely as this Luka trade would have if you had asked us on Saturday morning. But we're a few years removed from Carmelo calling LeBron the GM of the Lakers and everyone referring to LeBron as the shadow GM. And he reportedly had no idea that Davis was being traded. He was out to dinner with his family. He was like Alex, just looking at his phone and finding out about this when it happened. Nor did Davis know, nor did Doncic know. So this is a departure from the idea that when superstars are changing teams, often they're the ones orchestrating that move. I don't know whether this is just a singular occurrence or whether that is reflective of a larger shift.
Next up, 9 massage therapists have made disturbing allegations against one of the best kickers in NFL history, the Baltimore Ravens' Justin Tucker. We will discuss it.
This ain't the little itty-bitty teeny-tiny bowl. This is Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HANGUP. That's code HANGUP for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-97777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
A note to our listeners, this segment contains graphic discussion of alleged sexual misconduct. Last week, the independent Baltimore Banner, a news outlet that has filled a lot of the coverage void created by the iconic Baltimore Sun falling into the hands of a series of bad owners, released a bombshell report about Justin Tucker. Tucker is the kicker for the Ravens, and while his game declined badly this year and his career may well have been over even before this reporting came out, Tucker is an extremely famous guy in Maryland, a real institution around Baltimore. He's even a spokesman for Royal Farms, which is right up there with Old Bay and Natty Boh among community food institutions in the state. Justin Tucker is certainly a very prominent Maryland guy, and the Banner's reporting about him is very upsetting. The outlet first reported that 6 massage therapists, all women, had relayed, quote, troubling experiences when treating Tucker between 2012 and 2016. The women allege a pattern of inappropriate sexual behavior, including ejaculating during 3 of his treatments. After that first report by the Banner, 3 more therapists, to make for a total of 9, shared worrying stories about Tucker with the outlet. The management of 2 spas in the Baltimore area banned Tucker from ever returning, the Banner reported, and one woman shared a letter that she said she wrote to her employer in 2015, about a decade ago, about her experience with Tucker. And that letter says, quote, "I no longer feel safe or comfortable working with him," end quote. Ben, that is a lot of accusers and substantial documentation about Justin Tucker.
It is. Obviously, the NFL and the Ravens can and should investigate and corroborate before they decide how to handle this. But based on the Banner's reporting, this is truly terrible. And even if you're someone who's inclined to reserve judgment, it is very hard to imagine that so many massage therapists at multiple spas would have made up or misconstrued these incidents. This is their job. They do many massages. I trust that they know the difference between accidental and intentional exposure or contact. As you noted, Justin Tucker is a famous, wealthy man, a local hero. These women have a lot to lose by speaking up, and a lot of the allegations seem to have been well documented and discussed at the time. And you can see why they didn't come to light at the time, because, of course, these businesses, not only do they want lucrative clients to keep patronizing their businesses, they don't want to broach this sort of subject publicly. It's easy to sweep this sort of stuff under the rug, where you have this kind of power imbalance and the financial incentives at stake. And we know how vulnerable sex workers have always been to abuse. Massage therapists aren't signing up for any sort of sex work, but clearly are subject to similar violations. We've talked about the Deshaun Watson situation on this podcast, and there are a lot of parallels here. And of course, given the team involved here, the Ravens, and their history with Ray Rice and the way they bungled that incident, they said that forced an organizational reckoning. When Watson was suspended in 2022, Ravens head coach John Harbaugh said, "We're kind of a zero tolerance situation. By all means, yes, look into it. But if these allegations are substantiated, then he's got to be gone, or it'll be clear that the kind of zero tolerance was doing a lot of work." And Tucker is 35 years old. He's not a great kicker anymore. Maybe that makes it easier to cut ties when the time comes, even though he's a franchise legend. But for now, it's just disturbing to read these accounts.
Lindsay, Tucker has taken issue with the journalism here in his denial, which is pretty expansive. He calls it, quote, "desperate tabloid fodder." I want to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking at the denials that his lawyer has issued to the Banner and kind of how they're presented with the evidence of the reporting. So first of all, Tucker's lawyer said that it is unremarkable and not news that he might have become exposed during a massage, because athletes often shift around due to the discomfort that accompanies body work. Regarding the ejaculate that many massage therapists said that they found on the table, the lawyers said that there were a myriad of explanations for why a massage table would appear damp, sweat, body oil, and that, their observations that it was ejaculate was a wild and inherently improbable conclusion. The massage therapist, one of them, who goes by Jay, said, "It was semen. I know what semen looks like. I have dated men." One of the studios, Studio 921, Tucker's attorney denied that he was banned from that studio. One of the things they said was that they sent a screenshot of an undated photo of Tucker posing with Studio 921 that appeared to be posted by the spa on TripAdvisor in 2016, which would be after the alleged ban. They also provided copies of an email from 2018 that the lawyers say, showed the spa was actively inviting Tucker back for additional appointments. And they say, that is inconsistent with the idea that he was banned. The Banner reported that the body of that email was addressed to #921fam and advertised as a holiday special. So this is like a mass marketing holiday ad that Tucker's lawyer is saying was a personal invitation for him to return to the spa to get massages at another place, the QG. This is from the more recent allegations that came out after the initial round of reporting. Tucker's attorneys produced an email exchange from the QG in which a therapist told him that she had enjoyed working with him as a client. And we are sorry to see you leave the QG, but wish you the absolute best. It has been a pleasure working with you. And don't forget to tell all your coworkers about us. Safe travels, and we hope to see you again. So this was again proof that he could not have been banned because of this email. The reporters were able to find the woman who sent the email. She told that banner that she was the QG's lead massage therapist, and writing letters to high-profile repeated clients was one of her job responsibilities. This massage therapist said that during the 4 years that she worked on Tucker as a massage therapist, his actions became increasingly inappropriate. When this therapist read the banner's investigation last Thursday, she cried because it stirred up memories. The banner spoke with another employee who said that this woman, the woman who wrote him the email that they are citing as proof that he did no wrongdoing, this woman described Tucker's inappropriate actions to another employee at the time, and they found corroboration that she told her husband about Tucker's behavior in 2018. There is a lot of proof here, and I think that the fact that this lawyer is not in any way denying that he exposed himself on the table, that his best defense is this is normal, I think that says a lot.
Yes, I can only speak to a much smaller number of experiences getting a massage than Justin Tucker or his lawyer can speak to, but the notion that it's just completely common and, typical course of business that a man would expose his penis during a massage is not right. I'm confident saying that. I've just simply never heard of that being a necessary and kind of de rigueur part of a massage treatment. And I suspect that the attorneys are relying on people not knowing that, but that one does not pass particular muster with me.
Yeah. And it's just such a repeated pattern, apparently. And many of the accounts mentioned that some of these women, knowing Tucker's reputation or having had previous experiences with him, took pains to wrap things more tightly to prevent this sort of thing occurring. And yet it did. So again, clearly, based on those accounts, it seems like it could not have been an accident. And the fact that it happened so many different times with different people in different places really strains credibility to suggest that this was completely innocent. And how many different stories of abuse have we seen that come in this setting of massage or sports work? Often it goes the other way, where it's the person who's doing the work on the athlete, and in many cases a minor, right? And there's molestation occurring because you have these private settings where it's often one-on-one, and then it becomes, this wasn't on camera. It's this person said this and that person said that, and who is going to be more trusted and who has the power in this situation. And so you can see why that situation would be ripe for abuse.
All the massage therapists in this article recognize things such as sometimes there's an involuntary erection or, the towel slip or something during these massages in the groin area. And they all say, this wasn't that. He was continuously moving his hips, wiggling and taking the coverings off repeatedly during the massage. There was also touching. And, that one woman said, I tucked him in like a baby, but he kept repositioning himself. So I would brush against him. And this is not normal massage behavior. I've done hundreds of massages. I've never seen anyone else do that. But I think what takes this to the next level, beyond just like all of us saying, oh, this is bad, do not do this, is the fact that this seems like it was in a lot of ways an open secret. There are at least 2 massage parlors that confirmed on the record to the Banner that they banned Justin Tucker from getting massage appointments there in 2014 and 2016. And all of these allegations happened between 2012 and 2016. It really seems impossible that the Ravens didn't know about this. And this was also all happening. The Ray Rice video came out in early 2014. So that is the climate that we're talking about. And to me, I mean, I don't have proof that the Ravens knew, but there's post on Reddit from 2 years ago bringing up these allegations. Someone found some comments. There are tweets from a few years ago bringing up these allegations. This has been talked about publicly. There have been whispers. I'm not saying they rose to the level that every Baltimore Ravens fan knew about them. Of course, that's not true. But there's documentation here. There's a trail here. Baltimore is not that big of a city. And it's really hard to imagine that the organization didn't know about this. And he's been lifted up as a hometown hero.
Yes, he is. He's absolutely an institution around Baltimore. It will be interesting to see where this story goes from here. I'm not going to prejudge either the existence or the outcome of any NFL investigation of this or any potential legal ramifications that might come of it. But I would feel comfortable predicting at this point that I think we have seen him kick for the last time for the Ravens and probably in the NFL. And that's a judgment not based on any claim to knowing the truth of this case, but sort of an understanding of the way these things tend to go in the NFL. Justin Tucker is heading towards the backside of his 30s. His kicking performance drastically declined this year. He became really a liability for the Ravens after a decade of being, I think, the best to ever do it. It just seems, if you look at an NFL team's typical risk-reward calculations, like you will probably not be seeing Justin Tucker continuing to kick for the Ravens beyond into next season. That's just my educated interpretation of the way that these things have tended to go in the NFL, not based on conversations with Tucker or the Ravens, but it would be in line with teams' typical handling of this if this were it for him kicking.
You have a lot more faith than I do. I think pretty much everyone who has faced allegations of any kind who has had talent, I mean, there are always kickers that are needed. I don't think he'll be back with the Ravens, but I think he will get signed and kick in the NFL next season, unless there is a lengthy suspension. You just see time and time again these players getting, other chances. I'm not saying they're one-on-one, but, Kevin Porter Jr., not a superstar in the NBA, right? He's back on rosters. There's always people willing to give another chance. And I think that there's going to be an injury to a kicker during the season next year, and they're going to bring him in. I just think it's really important to keep talking about this and to go through this. I know that this is not fun to listen to our listeners. I know that a lot of this is like, why should we even, what's the point of even discussing it? This is bad. We know this is bad. But you have to look at these things, right? The reason that a big reason why this keeps happening is because enough of us look away, and I've looked away tons of times when I've read reports and read headlines, and I've gone, I don't want to read beyond that because this is too much for me. But it's also important that Tucker is white, and he's this clean-cut white dude, and he has portrayed himself as the ultimate family man, and Catholicism and his singing baritone and all of these really clean-cut things. And he was in a position of power, and he abused that. And look, we know that it is not a racial thing to be an abuser by any stretch of the imagination. But what we do have is often the cases where it is a black player get more attention. And a lot of that is because of the demographics in the NFL and in the NBA. But I think it's important to, this is a kicker. This is one of the best kickers in NFL history. This is a a white guy with a polo who looks like he could be anyone. He just, fits in, and he's still capable of this. And look, there are plenty of places where you can get sexual massages. Like, you can pay for them, and they are consensual because you're paying for them. That's not the problem. The problem is this is an abuse of power. And that's what you're getting off on. That's what he's getting off on. That's what Deshaun Watson's getting off on, is this abuse of power and use of their celebrity to put vulnerable women. All of the women were very young and early in their careers when they were, working with him. And it seems like that is what he got off on. And statute of limitations has passed on all of these allegations. So if there's any recourse in the courts, it would be civil, and that would be a tough road, but we'll see what happens. I'm not very optimistic about there being any sort of accountability, but I do still think it's important to talk about because this just keeps happening. And might I mention, our government is now full of abusers and people in positions of power, and we just got to keep calling this stuff out.
And you mentioned looking away, Lindsay, and what changed things with Ray Rice was that finally we couldn't. We looked directly at it, and that finally changed the Ravens' response because video footage came out. That's probably not going to happen here. And so there won't be the same sort of forced reckoning, undeniable evidence, or what some people would consider undeniable. And you'd like to think that that was more than a decade ago. Things have changed. Certainly the Ravens, one would hope, have learned their lesson as a result of that incident. But we will see. It's not safe to assume that.
Next up, a gambling scandal in the NBA last year has at least a little bit more, but we don't know if it's more than that to the story. We'll talk about it.
This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. While MeUndies can't totally help your love life this Valentine's Day, they can offer you insanely comfy undies and loungewear to buy or gift. MeUndies has so many awesome Valentine's Day prints and styles. Plus, you can match with your partner, friends, or even your pets. This Valentine's Day, give the gift that'll keep them thinking of you and score huge site-wide savings at MeUndies.com/Spotify. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify. MeUndies. Comfort from the outside in.
In the now more than a half decade since American states started legalizing sports gambling en masse, I think 2 points are inarguable. One, we have not yet seen a game-fixing or point-shaving scandal unfold into public view that would rival the Black Sox scandal in Major League Baseball or any number of episodes with college basketball players during the 20th century. But two, we have seen a whole bunch of suspensions of players and team employees, a few lifetime bannings, and enough ominous investigations, these are just the ones we know about, to worry about when the next big one might be coming. Last year, the NBA banned Jontay Porter, a Toronto Raptors bench player whom the league found colluded with gamblers in a scheme where he manipulated his own stats, keeping them low by feigning injury or sickness to get himself out of the game, and then bettors sought to profit by taking the under on certain statistical totals of Porter's. It turns out, according to the Wall Street Journal last week, that there's a bit more to this story, and it surrounds now Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier. From the Journal, quote, authorities believe some of the people who arranged for Porter to fix his performance in 2 games last season had inside information that prompted them to bet large sums of money against Rozier a year earlier. The paper says that federal prosecutors are looking into Rozier, who played for Charlotte at the time. The NBA says it was made aware of abnormal betting activity around the player at that time, but found no wrongdoing. And you will note, of course, that the NBA did not make the matter public at that point. Rozier's lawyer told the Journal that he is confident that the feds will reach the same conclusion that the NBA did. Lindsay, I think everybody should hope so.
Why does it have to be the Hornets? Come on, aren't we low enough? This is just so frustrating. This game that we're talking about took place on March 23rd, 2023, between the Hornets and the Pelicans. And friends, if you're paying attention at all and betting on the Hornets-Pelicans game in late March, you are a sicko. Like, that is just the definition of sicko.
Particularly if you're betting statistical totals about Terry Rozier in any significant quantity of money.
He was basically the Hornets' best player throughout the season that year. I mean, Terry Rozier was... Listen, he was on the Hornets. There's a grading curve. But look, I look back at the box score from this game, and it's one of the most depressing things I've ever seen in my life. For a Hornets sideshow. 2 starters in double digits the whole game. PJ Washington with 18 points. Gordon Hayward with 12. And then you had Svi Mykhailiuk with 15 off the bench. The game was famous before today because it was Brandon Ingram's first NBA triple-double. New Orleans won the game 115-196. At the time, Terry, Scary Terry, as he's known, was averaging 21 points a game. He led the Hornets that whole season in total points, minutes per game, and total assists, and just behind LaMelo in points per game. In this particular, what we're talking about, I just think the details are important here. After only 9 minutes, he was subbed out during a timeout. It wasn't a visible injury. It was reported as a foot injury. He didn't return. If you want to know what's in favor that this was like a legit injury and not I'm getting out so that the unders will pass, he did miss the remaining 8 games of that NBA season. He didn't play again. So it could have been a legit injury. But I got to say, everything else looks really bad for Terry here. The Wall Street Journal reported that the flag was raised on this betting pattern by U.S. Integrity, which is a firm that works with sports entities, gambling operators, and government agencies to monitor the markets for suspicious activity. U.S. Integrity alerted sportsbooks and the NBA, as Alex mentioned, to these unusual wagers on the under. It was so significant, this betting pattern, that some sportsbooks even stopped accepting bets on Rozier's stats for that game, which some of the sickos did notice. There's a tweet from Real Time by DFS by Noah, Daily Fantasy Sports by Noah, saying, "Is there any reason why there are 0 TR props on any books or DFS sites? Is he out? Did I miss something? Very odd." And then he quote tweeted that, adding, "And now Rozier plays just 9 minutes and is out for the rest of the game. Conspiracy theorists are going to run with this one." That was on March 23rd. Another thing that looks really bad for Terry is the fact that during the previous 2 seasons, so the 2022 to 23 season and the 23 to 24 season, U.S. Integrity sent out just 3 alerts about NBA games. 2 of those were about Porter, and the 3rd was about Rozier. So it's not like a lot of stuff gets flagged and, doesn't go on. And we now know that this is a large scope criminal federal investigation, and that in addition to Porter, 5 other men have been criminally charged for their role in this gambling scheme. 3 have pled guilty, and now this Rozier news is coming out. So it doesn't look great.
It doesn't look great. It is worth noting that the NBA, at least for its part, didn't find that Terry Rozier had done anything wrong. We're going to see if the feds reach that same conclusion.
Yeah, if he was faking, he committed to the bit by sitting out the rest of the season, which would be smart, I guess, although the entire point of doing this would be dumb. But yes, now that a New York U.S. attorney is looking into it, Rozier still hasn't been accused of anything or charged with anything as far as we know. Even if there was suspicious activity tied to him, it doesn't mean he was necessarily responsible. Perhaps if he was dealing with some sort of lingering foot injury and someone else was aware of that, they could have passed the word along without his knowledge. But if there turns out to be not just smoke but fire here, then woof, it looks bad. For one thing, if the NBA had it flagged for them and knew about it and allowed him to continue playing over the past couple of years, that would really undercut any message that they might have about being tough on this sort of behavior. But beyond that, Porter was a younger, more marginal player with a gambling problem, exactly the type of fringe player one would think would be the biggest risk for something like this happening. In fact, last October, the NBA's betting partners agreed to stop accepting bets on players on 10-day contracts or 2-way contracts like the kind Porter was on. So you could have convinced yourself, okay, this won't actually be an issue for any more established players, so maybe we've nipped this in the bud. Rozier is an almost 31-year-old 10-year veteran who's earned more than $130 million to date and still has tens of millions coming to him, assuming he's not suspended or that his contract isn't terminated. So unless he just had a serious gambling problem or was just so deeply in debt somehow that he felt like he had to do that, there's not the same clear financial incentive here, other than the fact that people, despite being rich, sometimes like to get richer. So officials obviously would still have incentive. You still have the specter of Tim Donaghy looming over the league. You're never going to be able to just outlaw this behavior and make it 100% foolproof. And then the question is then, well, is this more likely or less likely to happen in this day and age, in this environment where legal gambling is rampant? Of course, there are a lot of people who will say, well, this looks terrible for the league to be in bed with these gambling partners. They're putting forth a pro-gambling message. Therefore, they are tacitly encouraging this kind of behavior, right? That is a common response to this sort of thing. And I'm with you, Alex. I don't really buy that. Is it unseemly for leagues to be in bed with gambling companies the way that they are, given all that we know about the societal effects of gambling and just the scourge of gambling addiction? Yes. But does it make it more likely for this sort of thing to happen? Not necessarily, because there are plenty of precedents for times that things like this happened or worse prior to the legalization of gambling. And you could also say, as Adam Silver has, that these things are more likely to be caught, given that the gambling is more out in the open than it once was.
I think there's a little bit of truth in everything here. I agree with you, and I frankly find it exhausting when anytime something like this is being investigated or wrongdoing is found, when people respond with, wow, that sure is terrible, now off to watch the commercials about the NBA sponsored by FanDuel. At no point in sports history, at no point was it okay for athletes or anyone associated with the teams to shave points, to affect the outcomes of games to satisfy gamblers. These are the biggest scandals in sports history. They have been since long before 2018, when the Supreme Court opened the door for states to legalize sports betting. And I think you're reaching for low-hanging fruit in a way that is not adding value to the discussion. What I do think is an interesting point, Ben, and you just start to allude to it right there, is that the NBA is right. It's very easy to flag suspicious bets if there's tons of money coming in on a random college baseball game on some weeknight or on very specific player totals in an otherwise unhyped, nondescript NBA game. Absolutely true. You know, there's firms like US Integrity and a couple of others who do this work. I do wonder a bit about whether the inundation of advertising and cultural ubiquity of gambling ultimately makes it a bit likelier that even some players who should know better might get into this, because it's impossible not to notice how easy it is to place some sports bets right from your phone. And there have been cases like in the NFL where there have been players who have been found to be betting on games while they've been injured or something like that, where I think that makes a lot of sense, actually, where I think it kind of passes muster. You know, Calvin Ridley, the NFL receiver, was injured and he sounded bored and he was making bets from his phone. And I get that. It doesn't excuse it. You can't do it. It's explained to you that you can't do it. But never, at no time in sports history, Lindsay, was it fine, normal, acceptable, socially cool for athletes to do anything in the ballpark of what Jontay Porter did, or what the feds are at least looking into around Terry Rozier, who, of course, may have done nothing. And there are lots of ways that inside information could go to gamblers other than the player giving it himself. I want to be very clear about that. I don't want to pick the wrong low-hanging fruit here when we talk about why this happens.
Yeah, the hypocrisy doesn't get to me as much. I do think that there could be something to the fact that maybe the player themselves isn't gambling, but a lot more people in the players' lives are on these sites and are gambling. And maybe your buddy asks you to do a favor, right? And you just don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't know. If I'm putting on a conspiracy hat again, and I'm looking at those 8 games that Terry set out and knowing that this got flagged for the NBA almost immediately, part of me wonders if that was kind of a little bit of a provisional suspension type thing, where just don't get back on the court until we do some investigating and figure out if there's anything to this. I have no reporting on that. Those 8 games are very interesting to me on either. And I also want to note that this investigation now, one of the reasons why I do think it's notable that they're looking back into this, even though the NBA cleared him, is because people within this ring are talking now, right? Because they have been, they're pleading guilty, they're cooperating. So more information is going to come out than what the NBA had access to in 2023. There's also a college game they're looking into. This could turn out to be really, really widespread. But I also just want to say, while I'm saying it doesn't look good for Terry, I love Terry Rozier, and he has a really great story. He came from a really, really hard life, and it's one of those stories you want to root for, right? One of those players who's, his dad was in prison most of his life. He had to move to live with his grandmother for safety because of fear of retaliation from one of the people his dad was involved in, feared for his safety. He's been through a lot, and he's turned into a really good NBA player. The Charlotte Hornets fans loved him. We got him in the Kemba Walker trade, and Kemba was the heart of the franchise. And I'm not saying Terry was Kemba level, but he was really beloved in Charlotte, and fans were really excited when he got the opportunity to go to Miami, because we were thinking, we want him to win. Like, this is good for him to get a chance to win. So I just want to leave with saying some good things about Terry, since I have implicated there might be some bad things.
Just asking questions. That's all you're doing. But I don't think there's any hypocrisy in leagues promoting gambling to fans while at the same time banning players from gambling. Those are 2 different audiences in 2 very different situations, and fans don't directly impact the game the way that players do. So I think it's okay to draw a line there. That said, if you're contributing to the inundation of pro-gambling messaging that we are all subject to these days, then just as you're increasing the participation in that gambling culture-wide, probably inevitably you're going to increase some gambling, and some subset of that being illegal gambling among your players. And then you just hope that that will be flagged. And it's not as if I trust sportsbooks to cut off problem gamblers, because their business model is milking those people for all that they're worth, and in many cases more than they're worth. And we know how predatory they are when it comes to exploiting people who can't help themselves. In this case, of course, they have a lot riding on the perception that sports are above board, as do their league partners. And so I do think that they at least attempt to be diligent about those things. But the NBA, it's in a tough spot because there are a lot of low leverage NBA games that people aren't paying that close attention to. Individual basketball players have a lot of impact on what goes on in the game because there are only so many players on the floor. And it's really tough to prevent a player from just feigning an injury, feigning some sort of illness, and removing themselves from a game so that someone hits on the under. So this is going to continue to be a thing. It has been a thing since time immemorial, and you can't put it back in Pandora's box. But obviously, the gambling will continue until the societal effects are maybe felt even more than they have to this point.
There were gamblers, as I understand it, who had the under 1 hour and 1 minute line for this podcast this week. Those gamblers have lost all of their money because we are already over the set total of 1 hour, 1 minute, and we still have a little treat for you at the end of this episode.
It is time for Afterballs, and Lindsay has one for us today, and I have the honor of teeing up the Afterball and bestowing a name upon it. I am not a big X Games guy, and on the slopes, I'm a skier, not a snowboarder. Nor do I do tricks. My main goal is to make it down the mountain in one piece. But when I was young, I was well aware that one of the most impressive tricks a boarder could aspire to was a 1080, as exemplified by 1998's 1080 snowboarding for the Nintendo 64. Memories. Not quite 20 years ago, in December 2005, the New York Times ran a piece by Lee Jenkins headlined, "3 revolutions have equaled a transformation in snowboarding." Some selected lines: "The 1080 is the most powerful move in snowboarding, a 1,080-degree spin that separates Olympic contenders from Olympic wannabes. Anybody who can make the requisite 3 revolutions in midair could wind up on the podium in Turin, Italy. Like many aspects of snowboarding, the 1080 did not exist 5 years ago. Those who could do the 900, 2.5 revolutions, were considered the most aerodynamic riders. But in this sport, with fashions changing from winter to winter, the degrees of difficulty are constantly being enhanced. Now there are riders doing reverse 1080s, doing back-to-back 1080s, grabbing their board while they do 1080s. It is not uncommon to hear of a snowboarder winning an event on the strength of a 1080. With an estimated 25% of men's professional half-pipers incorporating the 1080 into their routines, it has become known around the pipe as the 10. Because it takes so long to make 3 revolutions, little time is left for somersaults or backflips, the kind of flourishes that snowboarding so often celebrates. Many riders prefer more aesthetic tricks like McTwists or cabs, but they feel 1,080 degrees of pressure to keep up with the latest trend. Among the first riders to master the 1080 were Ross Powers and Danny Cass, who perfected it before the 2002 Olympics. Soon enough, the 1080 will probably be as passé as the 900. Something to do before showing off the really big moves. Perhaps the 1260 is one Olympics away. Well, it was. Shaun White, who was quoted in that piece saying that he hated the 1080 because it was so easy to totally lose track of where you are, landed a double twist 1260 at the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. In 2011, Mark McMorris landed a backside triple cork 1440. A cork is an off-axis rotation, so in a triple cork, the rider inverts 3 times. In 2013, Torgeir Bergrum pulled off the first triple cork 1620. In 2015, Billy Morgan managed a quad cork 1800, and in 2017, Yuki Kadono did a quad cork 1980. In 2022, 16-year-old Japanese snowboarder Hiroto Ogiwara pulled off a backside 2160 that some said was the first quintuple cork, and on Friday, at the X Games in Aspen, Ogiwara, who's now 19 and who had fractured his forearm earlier in the day, did this.
Here's Hiroto's first run in the final. Left foot forward, natural way of riding, going to rotate backside. Turn his back to the takeoff right here. Oh my, that was a 2340. Watch this takeoff. 360, 720, 1080.
Oh my.
1440, 1800.
Oh, I'm going to throw
2160.
Oh my God, I'm nauseous.
2340.
On Saturday, Italy's Miro Tabanelli landed the first 2340 in a ski competition. He and Ogiwara both won X Games gold. So regardless of the snow sport, that's now the number to beat. Next stop, 2520. I'm sure changes in courses and equipment explain some of this rotation inflation, and from a safety and style standpoint, not everyone loves this emphasis on spin, but if there was any doubt that athletes are getting better across the board, just look how far we've come from 1080 snowboarding, both in video game graphics and in real-life feats. Lindsay, what's your 2340?
Ooh, thank you for that setup, Ben. Well, we all know that the big game, the Super Bowl, is this upcoming weekend, but you might have missed what was happening this weekend, this past weekend, which was the Pro Bowl. As I'm sure everyone knows, the NFC beat the AFC 76-63 in Orlando, Florida. Yes, that you did hear that correct. 76-63 was
yes, it's real, as Shams would say.
Yes, it's real. After being dismissed as a joke for decades, a few years ago, the Pro Bowl decided to fully get in on the joke, basically, and the Manning brothers turned it into the Pro Bowl games. Peyton coaches the AFC, Eli coaches the NFC, and we must say Eli is dominating. The NFC this year did what the Chiefs will try and mirror next weekend and won its 3rd Pro Bowl games in a row. Peyton said, "I'm 0-3 as a coach against Eli. I just have to own it." I know we usually talk about historic or kind of under the radar situations like Turkish football for Afterballs, but I really think it's important to talk about that the Pro Bowl has turned into holy moly. Like we were talking about how we wanted the golf league to maybe, embrace its putt-putt course destiny. And the Pro Bowl has essentially done that. The final score was actually a combination of a bunch of skill events that took place on Thursday and Sunday. The main event was a 7v7 flag football game. I have not watched a single second of the Pro Bowl games over the past 3 years, or the Pro Bowl probably for a decade. And my guess is that you haven't either. And I thought I knew what it was, but I was wrong. On Thursday, the main skills competition took place. The first one was called Passing the Test, which Wikipedia describes as an accuracy competition in which the quarterbacks attempt to hit as many targets as possible in the given time. That sounds pretty standard, but there's a trivia component to it. The quarterbacks are matched with a Pro Bowl partner and asked to answer 5 trivia questions to start, and they get extra time for each correct answer. The other skills competitions are dodgeball, satisfying catches, helmet harmony, I don't know what that means, the big spike, I can guess what that is, relay race, and then you have the actual game, which was on Saturday. But there were actually skills competitions immersed in the game. After the first quarter, there was a break for something called Punt Perfect. After the second, there was head-to-head, which I think is like a Madden live stream. And then during halftime, there was something called the Great Football Race. And then after the third quarter, there was a best of 3 tug of war. Once again, did not watch a single second of this, but The Athletic had a live blog, and I think it's important. This is from the actual 7v7 game. Playing quarterback for the NFC, Jackson Smith-Njigba nearly throws a pick six after a snap from center Baker Mayfield. Center Baker Mayfield is something I just said. But Kyle Hamilton's interception is negated after an illegal blitz penalty on Kyle Hamilton. Smith-Njigba is intercepted anyway 2 plays later, and Minka Fitzpatrick takes it all the way back to help the AFC narrow the gap. But then Jahmyr Gibbs intercepts the extra point conversion attempt and nearly runs it back all the way until absolutely chaos breaks loose as AFC players come off the sideline to help tackle, and Gibbs laterals the ball backward, prompting Scott Van Pelt to exclaim, "We live in a society." I didn't know any of this was happening. This is just like madness. It's, I think, interesting to look a little bit at the history of the Pro Bowl because we are hang up. The first official Pro Bowl was in January of 1951, where it was the American/Eastern Conference versus the National/Western Conference. After the merger in 1970, it became AFC versus NFC. Of course, over the years, there have been experiments. It's moved from after the Super Bowl to before the Super Bowl. But what's interesting is that the first Pro Bowl wasn't actually the first Pro Bowl. The precursor to the Pro Bowl was the NFL All-Star Game, which took place in 1939. It was sponsored by the LA Times. Imagine newspapers having money. And it was a charity for the Salvation Army. I actually think this format is fascinating. The NFL champions from that season, the New York Giants, played against a team of fan-voted all-stars. So there were even some non-NFL players there, I guess, from teams that weren't in the NFL, including 5 players from a team called the Los Angeles Bulldogs and the Hollywood Stars, which were 2 teams that would eventually become the Pacific Coast Professional League. I want to say that I found out something really interesting, which that the 1937 Los Angeles Bulldogs are one of 3 pro football teams that have gone undefeated and untied during a season. They were the first one to do it before the 1948 Cleveland Browns and the 1972 Miami Dolphins. They played against opponents such as the Pittsburgh Americans, the New York Yankees in football, the Rochester Tigers, the Boston Shamrocks. These are all great names, and you should listen to our bonus show because we're going to talk about names. The Providence Steamrollers and the Cincinnati Bengals, which is the same. One of the all-star players from the Bulldogs was Pete Maringer, who also was an Olympic gold medal winning freestyle wrestler. He was nicknamed the Kansas Whirlwind, which is a fantastic nickname. And he went on to play professional football with the Chicago Cardinals. He worked occasionally as a movie extra and stuntman. And he is KU's only wrestling icon to pursue a career in professional wrestling, mostly doing tours in New Zealand. And he is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. And I just want to say that I feel robbed that we did not get to see Pete Maringer in the skills competition, because I bet we could get some really good wrestling.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. That is all for this episode. We've also got a bonus show that is live right now about the immense difficulty that sports teams seem to be having doing a rather fundamental thing that is naming themselves. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we will see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I'm Alex Kirshner. Remember Zelma Beatty, and thanks for listening.